The morning sun was bright and warm in Lagos as Kofi sat in his large office on the 23rd floor of a tall building in the business district. He was a handsome man in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and a face that showed success. His office was decorated with expensive furniture, paintings, and photographs of him shaking hands with important people. Everything in the room spoke of money and power. But this morning, Kofi was not thinking about his business or the deals waiting on his desk. He was thinking about his marriage. He was thinking about Funk, the woman he had married 20 years ago. He was thinking about how he no longer loved her, how he had not loved her for many years now. And he was thinking about Zainab. Zainab was everything that Funk was not. She was young, only 32 years old. She was beautiful in a modern way with style and confidence. She wore expensive clothes and drove a fast car. Most importantly, she made Kofi feel alive. She made him feel like a young man again, full of energy and possibility. When he was with Zainab, he forgot about his age, his responsibilities, and the weight of his long marriage. 3 years ago, Zainab had come to work at an event that Kofi was sponsoring. She was a marketing consultant, smart and ambitious. Their eyes had met across a crowded room, and something had sparked between them. At first, it was just conversations. Then it became lunches. Then it became something more. For 3 years, Kofi had hidden his relationship with Zainab from everyone. He was careful. He used different hotels. He turned his phone on silent during their meetings. He told his wife he was working late. He told his business partners he had important meetings. But inside he was living a double life, and the weight of it was becoming too much to carry. The problem was that Kofi had begun to hate the life he had built with Funk. He looked at her across the dinner table and saw not the beautiful young woman he had married, but a reminder of his mistakes. He looked at their house and saw a prison. He looked at his responsibilities and saw chains. Funk had been a good wife. She had supported him when he was building his business. She had raised their 2 children, Adekunle and Chioma, with love and patience. She had been there for every success and every failure. She had stood by him through difficult times. But Kofi no longer saw any of that. He only saw limitation. That afternoon, Kofi made a decision. He could no longer live this way. He could no longer pretend. He would tell Funk the truth. He would ask for a divorce. He would start his life over with Zainab. He felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement as he made this decision, but he also felt relief. Finally, he would be free. Kofi called his lawyer, Mr. Okonkwo, a sharp man who had helped him with many business deals over the years. He explained to Mr. Okonkwo what he wanted to do. Mr. Okonkwo told him to be prepared for a long process, but he also told him not to worry. With Kofi's wealth and connections, he said, everything would work out fine. Kofi would keep most of his money. Funk would receive a settlement, but not nearly as much as she might hope for. The lawyer said these things as if they were simply facts about how the world worked. Kofi felt confident after speaking with his lawyer. He imagined how the divorce would go. He imagined keeping his business, his house, his money. He imagined Funk accepting the settlement quietly and moving on with her life. He imagined marrying Zainab and starting fresh. Everything seemed possible when he thought about it this way. That evening, Kofi drove home to the house he had lived in for 18 years. It was a beautiful house on the outskirts of Lagos, surrounded by high walls and green gardens. Guards sat at the gates. Inside, everything was expensive and well kept. But as Kofi drove through the gates, he felt none of the pride or satisfaction that he usually felt. Instead, he felt anxious. He found Funk in the garden, as he often did in the late afternoon. She was wearing a simple blue dress and a wide hat to protect her from the sun. She was kneeling in the dirt, working with her roses. She had always loved this garden. For 20 years, she had spent hours here, planting flowers, pulling weeds, watering plants. Kofi had always thought it was a waste of time, but he had paid for the best gardeners and the best equipment because Funk wanted it. When Funk saw Kofi walking toward her, she smiled. It was the same smile she had smiled at him thousands of times over their 20 years together. It was a warm smile, a smile that said she was happy to see him. This smile had once meant everything to Kofi, but now it made him feel uncomfortable and guilty. Funk stood up slowly and brushed the dirt from her hands. "You are home early," she said in her soft voice. She was a beautiful woman still, even now, even with the lines around her eyes that had appeared over the years. Her skin was dark and smooth and her eyes were kind. But Kofi could not see this beauty anymore. He could only see what she represented. His past, his responsibilities, his trapped life. "We need to talk," Kofi said. His voice was cold and hard. He was not going to soften the blow. He was just going to say the words and let them fall where they would. Funk's smile faded slowly. She had felt it coming for a long time. She had noticed the late nights, the secret phone calls, the way he no longer looked at her. She had seen the change in his eyes. She had felt the distance between them growing bigger and bigger each day. But hearing the words, hearing them finally spoken out loud, was different. It was like falling from a great height. "I want a divorce," Kofi said. The words were simple and hard and final. "I have already called my lawyer. We will handle everything through him. I think it is better this way." Funk did not cry. She did not scream or shout. She simply stood there in her garden, holding her gardening tools, and looked at the man she had loved for 20 years. In that moment, she understood that the man she had loved was gone. The man standing in front of her was someone else entirely. "I see," she said quietly. And then she turned back to her roses and continued her work, as if her whole world had not just fallen apart. The news came on a Tuesday morning. Kofi was in a meeting with his business partners when his secretary knocked on the door with a pale face. His father had suffered a heart attack at home. He was in the hospital and the family was asking for him. Kofi felt a strange sensation in his chest, but he told himself it was nothing serious. His father was strong. He would recover. But Chief Adeyemi did not recover. By the time Kofi reached the hospital, his father was already gone. The old man had died peacefully in his sleep, the doctor said, as if that made it any better. Kofi stood in the hospital room and looked at his father's face. Chief Adeyemi looked calm and dignified even in death. He looked like a man who had lived a full life and had no regrets. Kofi felt nothing. He should have felt sad but he did not. He should have felt guilty but he did not. He only felt tired and confused about what he should do next. The funeral preparations began immediately. In African tradition, the death of an elder like Chief Adeyemi was not a small thing. The entire family gathered, along with extended relatives, friends, and important people from the community. The funeral lasted 3 days. There were ceremonies and prayers. There were stories and memories shared about Chief Adeyemi's life and his character. There was much crying and much talking. Throughout all of this, Kofi played his part. He wore the traditional white cloth that showed he was in mourning. He sat in the front row during the ceremonies. He accepted the condolences of people who came to pay their respects. He listened to people speak about how great his father had been, how he had been a man of honor and integrity, how he had taught his children the importance of family and duty. Kofi wondered if any of these people knew about Zainab. He wondered if they knew about the divorce papers. He wondered if they knew that he had betrayed everything his father had taught him. But he said nothing. He simply sat and listened and accepted their words. On the 3rd day of the funeral, after all the ceremonies were done and most of the visitors had gone home, the family gathered to hear the reading of Chief Adeyemi's will. Kofi's mother, Mama Adeola, sat in the center of the room, still wearing her mourning clothes. Kofi's sister, Blessing, sat beside her with her husband. Kofi's younger brother, Tund, sat on the other side. The family lawyer, Mr. Ibrahim, stood at the front of the room with the will in his hands. Kofi expected the reading of the will to be straightforward. He expected his father to have left the house to his mother. He expected some money to be divided among his children. He expected to receive a good portion of the estate because he was the eldest son and because he had always been his father's pride and joy. At least, that was what Kofi had believed until recently. But as Mr. Ibrahim began to read the will, everything changed. The lawyer's voice was calm and professional, but the words he spoke were like bombs exploding in the room. Chief Adeyemi had left specific instructions. The house and most of the estate were to go to Funk and to Adekunle and Chioma. Kofi was to receive only a small portion, barely enough to cover his personal debts. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Everyone stared at Mr. Ibrahim as if they had not heard correctly. Then everyone began to speak at the same time. "That cannot be right," Kofi's mother said, her voice shaking. "Kofi is the eldest son. Why would his father do this?" Mr. Ibrahim raised his hand and asked for silence. He then explained that Chief Adeyemi had made several changes to his will 6 months ago. He had called Mr. Ibrahim to his house and had given him very specific instructions. Chief Adeyemi had said that he wanted the will read exactly as he had written it, and he had wanted his reasons explained to the family. Mr. Ibrahim then read from a letter that Chief Adeyemi had written. In this letter, Chief Adeyemi explained that he had discovered his son's infidelity 3 months before. He had hired a private investigator to follow Kofi because he had noticed strange behavior and had wanted to know the truth. The investigator had confirmed that Kofi was having an affair with a younger woman. More than that, Kofi had already started the process of divorcing his faithful wife. Chief Adeyemi wrote that he was deeply disappointed. He wrote that he had always taught his children that family was the most important thing in life. He wrote that he had always shown them the importance of honor and integrity. He wrote that he had believed Kofi understood these values and would pass them on to his own children. But, Chief Adeyemi wrote, Kofi had thrown away these values for selfish reasons. Kofi had hurt a good woman who had done nothing but love him and support him. Kofi had betrayed his marriage and his family. Kofi had chosen a young woman and money and excitement over his responsibilities. Because of this, Chief Adeyemi had decided to change his will. He wanted to protect Funk and the children. He wanted to make sure that they would be taken care of even though Kofi was abandoning them. He wanted Kofi to learn that there were consequences for his actions. He wanted Kofi to understand that no amount of money and power could replace the love and respect of one's family. Chief Adeyemi ended his letter by saying that he loved his son, but he could not reward him for betraying everything they believed in. He hoped that one day Kofi would understand why he had done this. He hoped that one day, Kofi would change his ways and become the man that Chief Adeyemi had believed him to be. As Mr. Ibrahim finished reading the letter, the room fell completely silent. Kofi felt the blood drain from his face. His mother was crying. His sister was looking at him with disappointment and anger. His brother shook his head slowly. Kofi wanted to speak. He wanted to defend himself. He wanted to explain that his father did not understand the situation. He wanted to say that it was not fair. But the words would not come. Funk, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the room with her children, stood up slowly. Tears were streaming down her face, but she stood with dignity. She looked at Kofi for a long moment, and in her eyes, he saw something that broke him more than anything else could have. He saw that she had known about his betrayal. She had known, and she had been preparing herself for this moment all along. As Funk left the room, followed by Adekunle and Chioma, Kofi understood for the first time that his life had truly changed. His father's will was not just a document about money and property. It was a final message from the man he had loved, a message that told him he had lost everything that truly mattered. The news of Chief Adeyemi's will spread through Lagos like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone in the business community knew what had happened. They knew that Kofi had been cut off from his inheritance. They knew that his father had left most of his wealth to his wife instead. They knew that Chief Adeyemi had done this because of Kofi's infidelity. In a society that valued honor and family loyalty above almost everything else, this was the worst kind of scandal. It was not just a private matter between Kofi and his family. It was public knowledge, and it said something very clear about Kofi's character. It said that he was a man who could not be trusted. It said that he had betrayed not only his wife but his entire family. It said that even his own father had lost faith in him. The first signs of trouble came at Kofi's office. He had 3 major business partners, men he had worked with for many years. They had built their import-export business together, and it had made them all very rich. But on the morning after the will was read, Kofi received calls from all 3 of them. They wanted to meet with him. The meetings were short and painful. The first partner, Mr. Adebayo, sat across from Kofi's desk and simply said that he could no longer work with him. He said that trust was the foundation of business, and Kofi had shown that he could not be trusted. He said that his own reputation was important to him, and being associated with Kofi now would damage that reputation. He said that he wanted to buy out Kofi's share of the business at a very low price. It was far less than what the business was actually worth. Kofi tried to argue. He tried to explain that his personal life had nothing to do with his business abilities. He tried to say that they had worked well together for many years and that should count for something. But Mr. Adebayo would not listen. He simply stood up and walked out of the office. The second partner, Mr. Okafor, was more polite but just as firm. He said that his family was very traditional, and they did not want to be connected to scandal. He said that his wife had been upset when she heard the news about Kofi's divorce and infidelity. He said that in his culture, a man who could not keep his family together was not a man who could be trusted with business. He also wanted to buy out Kofi's share, and his offer was even lower than Mr. Adebayo's. The third partner simply did not show up for the meeting. Instead, he sent a letter through his lawyers saying that he was dissolving the partnership immediately and that he was taking legal action to protect his interests. It was clear that he did not want to have anything to do with Kofi anymore. Within 1 week, Kofi's business empire began to crumble. He was forced to sell his shares at prices far below their real value. He lost millions of naira in the process. The business that he had spent 20 years building was suddenly no longer his. But the financial damage was only the beginning. The real damage came to his reputation. Kofi's clients began to cancel their contracts with him. The suppliers he had worked with for years stopped returning his calls. The banks that had always been happy to lend him money suddenly became very careful about his credit. Word spread through the business community that Kofi was a man in trouble, and no one wanted to be associated with a sinking ship. People who had respected him for years now looked at him with disappointment or even contempt. When he walked into restaurants where he had always been welcomed, he noticed servers were less friendly. When he attended business events, people found excuses to leave conversations with him. The phone calls and invitations that had once flooded his life simply stopped coming. But perhaps the cruelest blow came from Zainab. Kofi had imagined that Zainab would stand by him during this difficult time. He had imagined that their love was strong enough to weather any storm. He had thought that she valued him for who he was, not for his money and power. But he was very wrong. 3 weeks after the reading of the will, Kofi called Zainab to arrange a meeting. She was cold and distant on the phone. When they finally met at a small hotel, she was not the warm and passionate woman he had known. She was someone else entirely. "I cannot do this anymore," she said simply. She would not even sit down with him. She stood by the window with her arms crossed, looking out at the city. "What do you mean?" Kofi asked, though he already knew the answer. "I mean this is finished," Zainab said. "I heard about your father's will. I heard that you lost your business. I heard that you are no longer the man I thought you were. My feelings for you have not changed," Kofi said desperately. "I still love you. We can still build a life together." Zainab laughed, but it was not a kind laugh. "You love me? You destroyed your marriage, your family, your reputation, and your business for me. And now you have nothing. What am I supposed to do with a man who has nothing? I was attracted to you because you were successful and powerful. Now you are just a middle-aged man with debt and problems." She turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw no love, no compassion, no connection. She saw only a calculation. She had been attracted to what Kofi had, not who he was. Now that he had lost everything, she had no reason to stay. "I am leaving Lagos," Zainab said. "I have a job offer in Dubai and I am taking it. I wish you well, Kofi, but I cannot be part of your life anymore." And just like that she was gone. The woman for whom Kofi had destroyed his marriage, his family, and his life simply walked away when he needed her most. Kofi's family situation did not improve. His mother would not speak to him. His sister Blessing had made it clear that she blamed him entirely for bringing shame to the family. His brother Tun came to see him once, and they had a difficult conversation in which Tun told him that he had disappointed everyone. Even his own children, Adekunle and Chioma, were distant and angry. They would not return his calls or respond to his messages. As for Funk, she was civil to him, but she was not warm. She did not refuse to speak with him, but she spoke to him only when necessary. She had moved into the house that had been left to her, and she had hired a good lawyer to handle the divorce proceedings. She was taking care of their children and beginning to build a new life for herself. Within 6 months, Kofi found himself completely alone. He had lost his business, his reputation, his family, and his future. He had a small apartment that he rented, and he had enough money to live for a while longer, but his savings were running out quickly. He had no job, no prospects, and no one who cared about him. He would sit in his small apartment at night and think about the choices he had made. He would think about how he had thrown away everything that was good in his life. He would think about his father's letter and understand finally that his father had tried to teach him a lesson one last time. But it was too late. The damage had been done, and Kofi had to live with the consequences of his own actions. In the weeks following the reading of Chief Adeyemi's will, Funk sat alone in the garden she loved so much. The roses were blooming beautifully, and she spent her days tending to them, thinking about her life and what came next. She had every right to be angry. She had every reason to seek revenge. She could have used her newfound wealth to make Kofi's life even more difficult. But that was not who Funk was. Instead, she made a quiet decision. She would not let Kofi's betrayal destroy her. She would not waste her energy on anger and revenge. She would take the gift that Chief Adeyemi had given her and use it to build something good. She would build a new life, not just for herself, but for her children and for the community that had always supported her. The first thing Funk did was to sit down with a lawyer and an accountant to understand exactly what she now owned. The inheritance included the house where she had lived for 18 years, several pieces of land in good locations around Lagos, some money in the bank, and investments that had been carefully managed by Chief Adeyemi. When the accountant explained everything to her, Funk realized that she had more wealth than she had ever imagined. For a moment she felt overwhelmed. But then she felt something else. She felt possibility. She felt hope. She felt that her life, which had seemed to be ending just weeks ago, was actually beginning again. Funk had always been a strong woman, but she had spent 20 years focused on being a wife and mother. She had supported Kofi's business and his dreams. She had raised their children with care and attention. She had managed the household and kept everything running smoothly. But she had never done anything just for herself. She had never pursued her own ambitions or dreams. Now she decided that it was time. Funk had always loved beautiful things. She had always had a talent for design and decoration. Even her garden, which had started as a simple hobby, had become something that people admired and asked her about. She had friends who had suggested many times that she should do something with her talent, maybe start a business selling garden plants or offering design services. After careful thought and planning, Funk decided to start a business. She would create and sell high-quality plants, flowers, and garden design services. But she would do more than just sell plants. She would teach people how to care for their gardens. She would help them create beautiful outdoor spaces where they could relax and find peace, just like she had always done. She called her business Funk's Garden Haven, and she began preparations immediately. She used some of her inheritance to buy equipment, plants, and supplies. She hired experienced gardeners who could help her. She created a small office and a display area where people could come to see the plants and discuss their garden needs. The business grew slowly at first, but it grew steadily. People in Lagos began to hear about this new company offering beautiful plants and expert garden design. They heard that Funk herself would come to their homes and help them plan their gardens. They heard that she had good prices and that she was honest and professional. Soon she had more business than she could handle. But Funk did not just think about making money. She thought about how she could use her success to help others. She began to teach free classes on gardening and plant care for women in her community who did not have much money. She showed them how to grow their own vegetables so they could feed their families better. She showed them how to grow flowers that they could sell in the market to earn extra income. Many of these women had never owned their own business or made their own money before. Funk became like a teacher and mentor to them. She helped them believe in themselves and their abilities. She showed them that it was possible to take control of their own lives and build something meaningful. As Funk's business grew, she also focused on her children's education. Adekunle had been studying engineering at university when everything happened. Chioma had been in secondary school, preparing for her entrance exams. Funk made sure that nothing would prevent them from getting the best education possible. She paid for Adekunle's remaining years of university and helped him graduate with honors. She hired the best tutors for Chioma to help her prepare for her exams. When Chioma was accepted to a prestigious university in Ghana, Funk supported that decision completely, even though it meant her daughter would be living away from home. What impressed people most was how Funk handled her relationship with Kofi during all of this. She did not speak badly about him in public. She did not use her wealth to punish him further. When their children wanted to spend time with him, she did not prevent them, even though she knew it was painful for Kofi to see how well they were doing without him. She was professional and respectful in all her dealings with him regarding the divorce and legal matters. She did not try to take more than what was fair. She simply wanted to move forward with her life and let him do the same. People in the community began to see Funk as something remarkable. She was a woman who had been betrayed by her husband, but instead of becoming bitter, she had become stronger. She had taken a terrible situation and turned it into something beautiful. She had not just survived her husband's betrayal. She had used it as a reason to build a better life for herself and to help others. 2 years after Chief Adeyemi's death, Funk's Garden Haven had become one of the most successful small businesses in Lagos. She had opened a second location and was thinking about opening a third. She had won an award for being one of the most inspiring businesswomen in the city. Magazines had written stories about her. Young women came to her asking for advice on starting their own businesses. Adekunle had graduated from university and had gotten a good job in his field. Chioma had completed her first year at university and was doing very well in her studies. Both of them were proud of their mother and spoke openly about how she had inspired them to work hard and believe in themselves. Funk had also made new friends. She had friends who had nothing to do with Kofi or her old life as a wife. These were friends who respected her for who she was and what she was building. She had a full and meaningful life. And perhaps most importantly, Funk had learned to be happy again. Not the desperate, clinging happiness of someone trying to hold on to a failing marriage, but a deeper, quieter happiness that came from knowing that she was building something real and good. One afternoon, while she was working in her garden at home, a young woman came to ask her for advice about starting a business. Funk spent hours talking with her, sharing her experience and wisdom. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Funk felt grateful. She was grateful for her father-in-law's wisdom. She was grateful for her children's love. She was grateful for her own strength. She was grateful that she had chosen not to let one man's betrayal define her life. Instead, she had chosen to define herself through her own actions and her own choices. And in doing so, she had become something far greater than she ever could have been as Kofi's wife. 2 years had passed since Chief Adeyemi's death, and Kofi was a different man. Not better, not yet, but different. He had reached a point in his life where he could no longer pretend or make excuses. He had lost everything: his business, his reputation, his family, his future. He had nothing left to lose, and that, strangely, made him finally ready to face the truth. Kofi sat in a small apartment in a modest area of Lagos. The apartment was nothing like the grand house where he had lived for so many years. It was simple and plain. The furniture was old. The walls needed paint. But it was paid for, and it was his, and somehow that made it feel more honest than anything he had owned before. He had spent the first year after losing everything in a fog of denial and anger. He had blamed his father for being too harsh. He had blamed Zainab for being shallow and selfish. He had blamed his business partners for being disloyal. He had blamed the society for being judgmental. He had blamed everyone except the one person who was truly responsible: himself. But slowly, over time, the anger had faded and something else had taken its place. It was not happiness. It was not peace. It was something harder and more painful. It was truth. Kofi began to see a therapist named Dr. Nwankwo, a kind and patient man who listened to Kofi's stories without judgment. In their sessions, Kofi had to face questions that he had been avoiding for years. Why had he cheated on his wife? Was it really about Zainab, or was it about something inside him that was broken? Why had he treated his marriage with such carelessness? Why had he thought his money and power could protect him from the consequences of his actions? The answers came slowly and painfully. Kofi realized that he had been running from himself for many years. He had used his business and his money and his affairs as a way to avoid looking at who he really was. He had been afraid of getting older. He had been afraid of being ordinary. He had been afraid of the responsibility of being a husband and father. So instead of facing those fears, he had tried to escape them. "You were not running from your wife," Dr. Nwankwo said in one session. "You were running from yourself." Those words hit Kofi harder than anything else. He realized that his father had understood this. Chief Adeyemi had not cut him off from the inheritance to punish him. He had done it to try to make Kofi stop running. He had done it to force Kofi to finally turn around and look at himself. In the second year, Kofi began to reach out to his children. It was terrifying. He did not know if they would want to see him or speak to him. He did not know if they would forgive him. But he knew that he had to try. He wrote a letter to Adekunle first. In the letter, he apologized. He did not make excuses. He did not blame anyone else. He simply told the truth. He told his son that he had been a poor father and a worse husband. He told him that he had made choices that had hurt many people. He told him that he was sorry and that he understood if Adekunle did not want to see him. To his surprise, Adekunle responded. His son agreed to meet with him for coffee. When they sat across from each other in a small cafe, Kofi barely recognized his own son. Adekunle had grown into a young man with his own quiet strength. He was kind and serious, and he listened as Kofi tried to explain and apologize. Adekunle did not forgive him immediately. Forgiveness would take time. But he was willing to listen, and he was willing to give his father a chance to rebuild their relationship. "I have been very angry with you," Adekunle said. "Angry at what you did to Mum and to our family. But I have also realized that staying angry only hurts me. So I am here to see if we can find a way forward." Over the following months, Kofi and Adekunle met regularly. They talked about Adekunle's job and his dreams. They talked about their family and their pain. Slowly they began to rebuild something. It was not the relationship they had before. That could never be rebuilt. But it was something new and more honest. Chioma was harder to reach. She had been a teenager when everything fell apart, and the betrayal had hurt her deeply. She had blocked her father's calls and had refused to see him. But Kofi persisted gently. He sent letters explaining his feelings and his regrets. He did not demand anything from her. He simply wanted her to know that he loved her and that he was sorry. After months of trying, Chioma finally agreed to meet him. She came with her mother, which told Kofi that Funk was supporting this, even though it could not have been easy for her. They sat in Funk's living room, and for the first time in years, the three of them were in the same room together. "I do not know if I can forgive you yet," Chioma said. Her voice was steady, but tears ran down her cheeks. "But I want to understand. I want to know why you did what you did. I want to know if you love us at all." "I have always loved you," Kofi said. "My love for you was never the problem. The problem was that I did not know how to be a good father and a good man. The problem was that I was selfish and weak. But please believe me when I tell you that my love for you and your brother has never changed. And slowly, over time, a fragile but real connection began to form between Kofi and his children. As for Funk, Kofi knew that they would never be husband and wife again. That door was closed forever and he accepted that. But he was determined to treat her with the respect and honor that she deserved. When there were matters concerning the children or property or money, he handled everything fairly and honestly. He did not try to take advantage. He did not try to manipulate. He simply tried to do what was right. One day, about 3 years after the funeral, Kofi ran into Funk at the market. She was with a group of young women, apparently teaching them about plants and business. She looked happy and confident and strong. When she saw Kofi, she did not avoid him. She greeted him politely and introduced him to the women she was working with. "Kofi, these are some of the women I have been helping to start their own businesses," she said. "This is Kofi, my ex-husband. He is the father of my children." There was no bitterness in her voice. There was no anger or resentment. There was simply a statement of fact, spoken with dignity. "That is wonderful work," Kofi said to Funk. "Your father would have been very proud of you." Funk smiled. "I think he would have been proud of both of us. If you had learned your lesson as I learned mine." Those words stayed with Kofi. He realized that his father's will had been a lesson for both of them. For Funk, it had been a lesson in recognizing her own strength and building something beautiful from pain. For Kofi, it had been a lesson in humility and the real cost of his choices. Kofi found work as a consultant for small businesses. He was not rich anymore, but he had enough to live on. More importantly, he had purpose. He helped young entrepreneurs avoid the mistakes he had made. He taught business ethics and the importance of integrity. He spoke to young men about the danger of running from themselves. He also volunteered at a counseling center, helping other men who were struggling with their own failures and choices. He knew what it was like to hit bottom. He knew what it was like to lose everything. And he could offer something real to others who were in pain. On the anniversary of his father's death, Kofi visited Chief Adeyemi's grave. He brought flowers and sat there for a long time, thinking about the man his father had been and the lesson his father had tried to teach him. "I understand now," Kofi said to his father's grave. "I understand that you were not trying to destroy me. You were trying to save me. You were trying to show me that real strength comes not from money or power, but from integrity and honor. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. But I understand now." As Kofi walked away from the grave, he felt something that he had not felt in years. It was not happiness exactly. But it was peace. It was the peace of a man who had finally stopped running and had finally turned around to face himself. He would never get back what he had lost. His marriage to Funk was over. His old life was gone. His father was dead. But what he had gained was something far more valuable. He had gained himself back. He had gained the respect of his children. He had gained a purpose. And he had learned that redemption is possible, even after you have destroyed everything, if you are willing to face the truth about who you are and what you have done. The real destruction, Kofi now understood, had not come from his father's will. It had come from his own choices. And the real redemption would come not from recovering what he had lost, but from becoming the man he should have been all along.